Good afternoon, Island Council members and members of the Central Committee, Rolando Wilson, Vito Charles, Saskia Matthew, Julio Every, Island Registrar, Ms. Akila Levinstone, Island Governor and Chairman of the Island Council, Johnson Johnson, members of the Executive Council, Commissioner Everton Haliger and Commissioner Bruce Agers, Island Secretary, civil servants, and to the general public, whether present here today or viewing via live stream. Welcome to the Central Committee meeting of Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Today we have 6 points on the agenda. Point 1 was the opener of the meeting, and we now move on to agenda point 2, which is the approval of the agenda. I now look to the council members for approval. Okay. We now move on to agenda point 3, which is the approval of the minutes. There are no minutes to approve today. These minutes from the meeting of December 4th will be added to our next meeting next month. Okay. We now move on to agenda point number 4, citizens' right to speak on agenda points with prior announcement. I was informed that no requests by inhabitants have been received. We can therefore move on to agenda point number 5. Agenda point number 5 is question round concerning announce or flag questions from incoming and outgoing correspondence list from October 15, 2024 to November 25th, 2024. This is in line with Article 18 of the Rules of Procedure from the Island Council meeting. So there were a number of questions flagged by Island Council Member Charles and myself. So we will ask these questions, and then the rest of the council can also ask any follow-up questions in this process. The first one is a letter from the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Kingdom Relations in regards to the budget of SABO 2025, and this was a flagged item by Island Council Member Charles. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see you started out the meeting quite efficiently. I guess we should try to continue in that same tone. So I'll try to keep the questions brief and not too much back and forth. In regards to the income correspondence, this is October 15th to 25th, 2024, February. There was a letter from the Ministry of Basic Care regarding SABO's budget of 2025, and in the letter, the ministry refers to some changes in the budget that should be addressed in the first budget amendment of 2025. I am just wondering if the Executive Council has taken note of this letter, and does the Executive Council agree with the ministry's statements, and if so, will the changes be incorporated in the first budget amendment of 2025? Can we expect to see it reflected in the budget, the first budget amendment of 2025?
Commissioner Zegers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and good afternoon to everyone. Yes, we are aware of the letter, and so is the Finance Department. And as much as possible, we will be incorporating those changes because we see them as improvements that will further lead to stronger financial management. For example, already, certain things have been included in quarter 3, the amendment to quarter 3, 2024. But we also see room based on their recommendations where we can even create more transparency where it concerns, difference between free allowance and special purpose grants. So as much as possible, those will be incorporated into the first quarter amendment for 2025. Whereas, other recommendations concerning like splitting up personnel costs, that's a bit more complex, but that will be brought along into the preparation for the budget of 2026.
Do you have follow-up questions at this time? Does anyone of the council members have any follow-up questions? No? Okay. We'll then move on to the Executive Council decision list. And the first 3 items on this list are mine, so I'll call them out and then I will ask the questions. So the first one was the Executive Council decision list of October 8th. The topic was mental health and safety report. The second one was of October 29th, and this is the domestic safety point phase 3. Community Information Center, and the third point was phase 2 of the domestic safety apartments. So how I will do it, I'll ask the questions per topic, and then I will give the Executive Council the floor to respond. So the first item concerning the mental health and safety report, I think this is the second time now this topic has been in the incoming correspondence, and now on this one it was on the Executive Council decision list. So this is also the second time that I've flagged this topic because I think it's something that deserves to be taken very seriously. For the public and for those of you here today, the findings of this research, I believe, confirms what many of us on SABA already know and voiced for some time already about serious gaps in both mental health support and public safety measures on our island. And while I do appreciate the study and finding of this report, I don't think we could afford to let this just be another report collecting dust on a shelf, and that we really need to act upon the findings in this research. So with this in mind, my questions are as follows. What was the methodology used by Onderzoekshuis for this research? How many participants were surveyed? And do you believe this sample size accurately represents the community? Some of the next steps mentioned are to involve stakeholders like community development, MHC and KPCN, etc. But what about direct engagement with the community as well? Will there be town hall meetings or other opportunities for public input or to explain the findings of this report? The report confirms that the Central Reporting Center in Bonaire is inefficient. Will steps be taken to establish a more localized, responsive reporting system for SABA? The report also identifies accessibility concerns. What are the biggest obstacles in this regard? Is it financial limitations, a lack of professionals, or something else? Could you please confirm? And what steps are being taken to address this? And my final question on this topic is, how will the effectiveness of mental health interventions be measured moving forward? For example, will there be a follow-up research? And if so, when? Because this report was already conducted in November of 2023. So it would be good to know what's the next steps. And this concludes my questions for this topic. Commissioner Heidegger? You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the Council. To the first question that you posed, Madam Chair, what was the methodology used for this research and how many participants? To answer that question, Madam Chair, on pages 2, 3, and 5 of the report describe the methodology that was used. It also lists the number of respondents that were interviewed, which was 63 individuals. The report explains that social marketing research looks at the world through the eyes of the target audience. Therefore, this report focuses on the experiences and perspectives of the respondents who participated in this research. Successful social marketing focuses on the target audience's interpretations rather than on objective facts. This should be kept in mind when reading this report. Following from this, one cannot state that the findings are necessarily representative for the entire community in SABA. It describes the experiences of 63 respondents that are relevant for policy development and implementation. Some of the next steps from the second question. Sessions were organized with relevant stakeholders to discuss the findings in the report. One of the identified action points among stakeholders was the need to communicate more clearly the reporting possibilities and procedures to the public and involve professionals. Subsequently, the governor asked the chief public prosecutor and the KPCN to work together on clarifying reporting procedures and rolling out an informative campaign about this. The mental health on SABA report findings were presented and discussed among key stakeholders within the safety network during the last safety network meeting on the 23rd of January to collaboratively develop an action plan. while initial steps focus on engaging stakeholders of the safety network. Direct community engagement is essential and is something that will be further developed in the action plan. One of the initiatives that was brought forward in the meeting on January the 23rd is an education program on mental health in schools. During the next meeting early March, this and other plans will be further explored. In regards to your question on Central Reporting Center in Bonaire, the reporting center is managed by the CAPPCN. The findings of this report are shared with the CAPPCN. Certain procedures are implemented with the aim of improving the reporting system for SABLE. CAPPCN is asked to evaluate this together with other partners such as BCACN and Coast Guard. Currently, the Executive Council is not aware of steps being taken to establish a more localized reporting system for SABLE. In general, it can be noted that there are challenges regarding the required scale to operate or establish a local reporting center 24/7. In regards to the question on the report also identifies accessibility concerns. And what are the concerns?
It was about the biggest, what's the biggest challenges at this time?
From the report and from discussions with stakeholders, there does not seem to be one main obstacle. Accessibility concerns are a mix of stigma and hesitance for asking help, not being familiar with available services, privacy concerns, and a limited number of professionals on island, amongst others. The main mental health service provider on island is Mental Health Caribbean. Recently, Mental Health Caribbean has added a new team member to their local team, which will diversify the available services. Discussions have taken place with management from Mental Health Caribbean earlier this year and will continue. Action points are mapping available services and public communication and exploring the possibilities to set up services online with off-island mental health service providers. In regards to mental health interventions, the data on availability of services, new services, and the update of these services will be available. Furthermore, mental health is one of the topics in the ongoing health survey and can therefore be monitored. There is no follow-up of this mental health and safety research plan at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Heiliger. Just to confirm, you mentioned that there's no financial or personnel complications right now, that it's just a stigma, which then prevents people from accessing the services that are available. That's what you're saying. Okay. Is there any follow-up questions from any of you at this time? Yeah.
I think I also want to follow up on the question that Madam Chair asked, because I have had discussions with persons, and I think we all have friends and family members who would like to get support whenever they're going through some difficulties. And like the governor mentioned yesterday, we all have a meeting regarding the personnel and development of the organization. We all come to, work and life, have experienced different challenges. And one of the things that I've heard from persons is that often the professionals available do not necessarily match the needs of particular participants, of particular clients. So, for instance, if I have an issue in with maybe addiction, or if I have an issue in my relationship, or I'm having, some, flashback or traumatic experience, that oftentimes the professionals that are made available are not able to assist me in the right manner. And I think that is a concern. So if they're saying that they have the right professionals at hand and they only have X amount of professionals, I'm very curious how they see that that mismatch. And then in addition to that, I saw something this morning even where in the Netherlands there is a significant backlog when waiting for certain professionals, up to 28 weeks with people with certain concerns. So are we just simply, trying to gloss over the reality, or are we speaking to the facts? Because I think it's important that we acknowledge how grave the situation is so that we can move forward and address it, in the right way. Again, I'm not a professional, but I also, have to listen to the experiences of persons in the community. So I'm just curious how they look at this in your conversations with them.
Maybe it would be an idea to invite the head of public health, and then we can have a discussion about this way forward. Because I understand where you're coming from. You don't have to qualify person to deal with the individuals that have individual. For example, you said addiction, so someone who has, for example, gambling or smoking or drinking, that specializes only into that or concentrates on that with the individuals. I understand that. I guess what they have is just a general mental health doctor that comes, not specialized.
I think that would be a good.
And it's something that I think we should pick up with public health.
Thank you.
I'll send an invite and then I'll correspond it with a quick view.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilliger. Madam Councilman, whenever you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, it wasn't really necessary follow-up. Vito pretty much summed up in so many. I'll just say that my question was more, what steps are we taking to curb this, and it was pretty much covered in that regard. So it's good that you suggested inviting public health doctor and as well as some other specialists I see in the audience might be able to assist in this regard as well.
I'll let him organize it and then
throw that out there.
Right, thank you. Anyone else had anything to follow up? No? Thank you, Commissioner Heidegger, for your response, and we look forward to the request for the information market concerning this topic, because I think many of us also have more concerns and more questions, and I think that may be the best way moving forward to adequately address them. So thank you. The next point was also from the Executive Council decision list, and this one was the Domestic Safety Point Phase 3 Community Information Center. This was also a topic I flagged. First, allow me to commend and of course support the government and the Community Development Department for spearheading the Community Information Center. I know it's something that you all spoke about for some time, and I really commend the efforts in this. I believe that this is a crucial step moving forward in protecting families and supporting those in need. But I also know for this initiative to have a strong, lasting impact, it must be accessible, trusted, and effective. So with that in mind, I have the following questions. And that is, what specific services will be provided at the consultation rooms? Will there be trained counselors, social workers, or specialists available full-time at the center? How will this center complement or differ from existing support services for domestic safety and child safeguarding, such as, for example, ZJCN, the former Youth and Family? So how will these programs differ from what is offered there? What strategies are in place to ensure that all members of the community, including those who may be hesitant to seek help, feel comfortable using these services? Because domestic issues, just like mental health issues, is all in the same bubble. And it also carries a stigma, and if people don't feel safe or welcome, they won't use the center. Will there be a structured outreach program to actively engage youth, parents, guardians, and at-risk families? Or will this be a center that rely are you coming in voluntarily? And I ask this because I think we all also know that a wait and see approach rarely works with social issues. So I think it's important that we also find ways on how to adequately reach people where they are as well. My next question is, how will information go out to the public about the services available at the center? Ensuring awareness is key in this, because many initiatives fail simply because people don't know that they are there. My next question, what will be the operating hours of the center, and will it be accessible for parents and individuals with different schedules if the need be? And in the executive decision list, it also spoke about parking spaces being made available. And concerning this, I just want to know how many parking spaces are going to be created, and will this be sufficient to accommodate visitors and staff without causing congestion? So that concludes my questions for this topic. So this one was on the topic of the information, Community Information Center.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. To answer the first question with specific services, social workers will be present at the premises during working hours. They will continue to provide current services, for example, the intake for social support, individual counseling, and subsidy applications. How will this center complement or differ from existing support services? At the moment, 3 social workers share an office and there is little confidential room for personal consultations. As we all know, this is at the Laura Lindsay building, and yeah, it is very small. The current office for social workers at the Laura Lindsay building will move to the Community Information Center. This ensures the presence of social workers on site, and individuals seeking information or support can easily walk in. The social workers will continue to provide their extensive services, tailor-made personal support, poverty support, etc. So more or less the same services that they rendered when they were at the Laura Lindsay building. The next question is, what strategies are in place? There is campaigns to raise awareness for domestic safety, socio-economic empowerment, and availability of services. In addition, activities and workshops will be organized surrounding the topic of domestic safety. These strategies strengthen the visibility of what services are available and may encourage those who need support to seek help. To the next question, if there would be structured outreach program, the aim is to actively engage the community via campaigns and activities. Furthermore, the center will have open hours where individuals can voluntarily walk in. How will information be disseminated to the public? Social domain media and campaigns officer supports publications for campaigns and workshops, which will work with CPR department to develop messages to reach a broader audience. For example, via the OLS social media web platform and website. Sabre Radio is another key channel for disseminating information to the public. What will be the operating hours of the center? The operating hours of the center are the same as the current social workers' working hours. The availability of the social workers will remain the same as is currently, only the location where they provide their services will change. So the location will be a new location and not. The new location provides more confidentiality as there are private rooms for consultation and counseling. Appointments for individual consultations can be made in agreement with the social workers. And with the parking, New parking spaces, approximately 8 to 10 cars, was created next to the building to avoid congestion. The new parking space provides ample parking opportunities for staff and visitors. I had the opportunity to visit the building about 2 weeks ago, and the entrance to the parking has to be modified a little bit. It was a little bit too narrow. So they were going to look into it with a contractor and see how it can be done. When I was there, they were busy doing renovation works to get the building up and running and functioning. I don't know if you all had the opportunity or if you were invited to visit. I guess not yet, because like I said, it was still under a bit of renovations, but it's something that is in the plan also.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
So you'll be able to get a walkthrough. Sorry for that.
No, it's fine. All right, thank you for the information. I think it's clear. For me, it wasn't clear in the Executive Council decision list if this was an expansion of the services that were already offered, but you made it clear that it's the same services offered, just a different name in a different building.
Yes.
So that's clear, and I'm glad to hear that there is room for flexibility when the need arises for persons on an individual basis. So that's also clear. So thank you for the responses. Does anyone else have any follow-up questions on this topic? No? Okay, and now this is my final point, and this one is phase 2 of the domestic safety apartments. And my questions here was about how was the number of apartments, which is 3, determined, and does this adequately meet the demand on SABLE for persons in the need of shelter? Will the apartments be designed to accommodate different family sizes, including single individuals, single parents with children, and if the need be larger families? My next question is, what are the security measures in place to protect residents from potential threats or abusers trying to locate them? Because this is SABLE, it's a very small community, and everyone knows where the shelter is. And we need to ensure that survivors are truly safe and protected from further harm. And I could be wrong, but as I see it now, I don't see any that the building is guarded. I could be wrong, but you can also clarify this. My next question is, beyond just providing a physical shelter, what emotional, psychological, and legal support will be available to help victims rebuild their lives? A shelter is only the first step, and what comes next is just as important. Is there a reintegration plan in place to help residents secure jobs if the need be, financial independence, and long-term housing after leaving the shelter? Because a shelter without an exit strategy can create more dependence rather than empowerment. And I think that should also be the focus. Empowerment and the empowerment side of things to ensure that victims can move on and live a better life than before. And my final question in this regard is, how will the shelter be maintained and staffed in the long run? Is there an operational budget already secured for the coming years? And that concludes my questions for this topic.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. To answer the first question, how was the number of apartments determined? The decision to establish 3 apartments was based on numbers of domestic violence cases reported in SABLE over the past years, and also the report findings of the report family relationships, domestic violence, and child maltreatment in the Caribbean Netherlands. SABLE. This was done by Ton Leifhardt, Judy Messman, Merrill Griffith Lendering, Tamara Salzbach, and Johan Kreuk, with collaboration with Leiden University, University of Curaçao, and UNICEF, the Netherlands. While the current demand fluctuates, data shows that at any given time, a small but significant number of individuals require emergency housing due to domestic violence or unsafe living conditions. The capacity of 3 units allows to provide immediate refuge while also ensuring manageable operational costs. The next question was, will the apartments be designed to accommodate different family sizes? Yes. The 3 apartments are designed to cater to diverse family structures. Maximum 4 people per apartment. For instance, single individuals who need temporary safe housing, single parents with children, 2 adults, 2 children, or 1 adult, 3 children. Ensuring adequate space for both parent and child or children. And also for larger families that require multiple rooms. The design interior is flexible to accommodate these variations while maintaining a home-like look and feel non-institutional atmosphere to promote healing and stability. So it's designed to make you feel at home. What are the security measures in place? Security is a top priority at the shelter, especially given Sabre's small community where its location is already known to many, unfortunately. From my experience visiting a shelter a year and a half ago in Curacao, I was being told that you never give up the location of a shelter. Unfortunately, it happened. The Sabre is small, so eventually people will open. The following measures will be implemented. Confidential intake process to minimize exposure and protect the identity of victims. Surveillance and access control to monitor and restrict entry to the top apartments. So this is where the victims will be. Close collaboration with CAPACN to ensure swift response to potential threats. Legal restrictions and protective orders were issued by the prosecutor to prevent abusers from approaching the premises. Secure communication systems allowing residents to discreetly seek help when needed. For safety reasons, all security mechanisms cannot be given out in UK. But however, you can be assured that these measures are aligned with best practices for shelters in small communities. And the next question was, beyond just providing a physical shelter. Providing shelter is only the first step. Comprehensive support services will be available to help victims and survivors rebuild their lives, including trauma counseling and emotional support throughout safety network stakeholders, including Mental Health Caribbean, legal guidance and advocacy, including assistance with court cases, restraining orders, custody matters, and legal protections. Life skills and empowerment programs to help survivors regain independence, such as Women Empowerment Group, Women in Finance, budgeting courses, and other personal development initiatives. The goal is to ensure that survivors not only escape abuse, but also rebuild their lives with confidence, stability, and long-term support. For the question of reintegration, a well-defined exit strategy is essential to prevent long-term shelter dependency. The reintegration work plan will focus on support from social workers of community development and culture in finding employment opportunities, for example, through Sabre Reach. Financial literacy programs teaching budgeting, financial planning, and economic self-sufficiency. Assistance from social workers in finding alternative permanent housing, including guidance on rental agreements and available housing support. This approach will guide survivors of domestic violence to successfully transition into independent living, avoiding prolonged shelter reliance and providing long-term stability. Filling the job vacancy for a family support counselor is essential to provide survivors with adequate skills and guidance for financial independence. And on the question of how will the shelter be maintained, to ensure sustainability, the shelter requires a mandatory operational budget supported by VVS and OLS to cover. Qualified staffing, including caseworkers, counselors, and administrative personnel. Emergency funding to address urgent needs to residents. A long-term strategy will be essential with continued government funding support from VVS and OLS to ensure uninterrupted operations and the ongoing safety and well-being of DV victims. Currently, a new administrative agreement for the coming years is being developed in collaboration with OLS and VVS.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. I think it's clear and like you mentioned, unfortunately we live in a small community and privacy doesn't always exist. But I'm happy to hear that the necessary steps are being taken to ensure that everyone who unfortunately ends up in this place will receive the support they need, but also can be sure to feel safe. And I think that's a top priority. You mentioned a few things about support programs for women, and I just wanted to throw this out, but men are also victims of abuse.
That's true.
And we should also have tailor-made programs for everyone across the board. I know there probably is, but I'm just saying it because you threw out some of the women programs available. And with this, I would like to conclude my questions. Does anyone else have anything to add in at this time? Island Councilmember Charles, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also wanted to thank the Commissioner for clearly, trying to outline what steps have been taken to support victims of domestic violence in the community. I remember once in a conversation with somebody, they said that we talk often about the victims of domestic violence, and like God mentioned that men are also victims of domestic violence, but we also don't talk about the perpetrators and what is done to ensure that they are aware of their role as perpetrators, but also how do we create awareness and understanding for their behavior. And I don't want to say that awareness and understanding that they should act in that way, of why they act in that way, and telling them that is unacceptable in our community. Because I think that also is important, and I listen to what you mentioned there, and I don't necessarily hear that in the statements. And even the other day when we met with the President of the Supreme Court, I mentioned to her that even there you see that the justice system takes a sort of back-footed approach in this area. Because, for instance, when victims have gone forward, they tell them that they cannot issue restraining orders against perpetrators because of the size of the community. And that to me is concerning, because you can also tell them, you can't be in certain locations where the victim is, at their job, at their place where they live, at the schools, in common areas. And if you see them in a particular location, you should leave. But the judges just simply say, I can't enforce a restraining order. So I think that speaks to how we continue to allow these men to just walk around as perpetrators without acknowledging what they've done wrong. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And then you also mentioned something about, in Curacao, the hidden aspect of the shelters. And I remember the first time we saw a shelter that was sort of known was in Bonaire, and they said, it's a small community, and it's almost impossible to hide a shelter in a small community because, they mentioned where when they had tried that, people end up, even people themselves would tell the partners where they were, and partners would come angrily looking for them. So I think the approach that we're taking where we put it central, creates another mechanism because if perpetrators seen there or offenders see it, then we can automatically highlight it. The community can call them out or call them out, so to speak. So I think that is something we need to take into consideration. But I'm very curious, how do we see addressing the behavior of men and or women in the community when they engage in such practices?
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Do you have any follow-up remarks?
It was true that men should also be included. I've heard that many times when I went to different conferences, especially on domestic violence. When you talk about the perpetrators, it is true. But also too that individuals that find themselves as perpetrators too should also seek help. You know, have a discussion with someone like a psychologist or something to find out where their behavior could be coming from, what leads to getting themselves involved in domestic violence. There's no shame in seeking that type of help. Trust me, there's no shame to it. But I think we live in a society where people feel like privileged. They don't want to go, they can do it on their own, but you can't make that change happen. That's why you have professionals in that. And it's something that is not. I would give a perfect example. Not being a domestic violence individual, but when I had a death in my family for a family member, I went and I seek professional help because I know I needed it because I couldn't deal with that tragic death at that instant. You know, so it's not to be ashamed about not wanting to seek help. You just need to have that conversation with those people that specialize into guiding you.
I think that's very valuable of you to express that. I think more men in our community need to also hear these sort of stories.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Councilmember Charles. Does anyone else have any follow-up remarks or questions or anything on this topic? No? Okay. Thanks again, Commissioner Heiliger. We now move on to the next agenda point, which we are still on the Executive Council decision list. And I will just call off the next 4 points, and then I'll give the floor over to Acting Councilmember Charles so that he can voice his questions. And those 4 points are approval, learning and development program, public entity SABA, 2024 to 2027. The following one is installation of Christmas lights. The third point is safety wall, St. John's and dancing place. And the final one is the P&C calendar for approval. Acting Councilmember Charles, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think yesterday we had a discussion with the Secretary and the Governor regarding the organizational development. And one of the things that we didn't discuss was it came up in the topic, but we didn't discuss the learning and development program. But I flagged it as a question because it was approved on October 29th. And I asked to receive it, and I received it just ahead of this meeting, so I wasn't able to really go through it to really get any insight into the content. But I had asked the Executive Council to summarize the plan and how it will be implemented. And then he mentioned that there were products that had been requested by 21 departments. And what is the vision for the development of the organization?
That was the final question.
That was the final question.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Charles and Chair Lady. Indeed, you only received the program today, so you'll take some time to go through it. And after this, you have more questions, and you'll email those so that you all receive the program for learning and development for the public entity 2024-2027. Human resource management is in the process of recruiting a learning and development specialist, which we spoke about yesterday, to fully implement the learning and development plan for the public entity moving forward. In the meantime, HRM is liaising with the heads of the different departments to get the details of the hard and soft skills which they want training for with the different providers and the costs. And once agreed upon, executive council proposals will be submitted by the department heads for training spread across the year. And then when a learning and development specialist begins, that person will support the process. I'll talk about what happened last year, what going forward. In 2024, a mixture of soft and hard skill trainings took place, some of which will be ongoing and moving forward for this year. Some of those were aggression management training, the hospitality training, the horsemanship, communication skills, how to gain self-confidence, independence as a person. This was also done in collaboration with the Silver Comprehensive School. We also have the HACSA Hope School that helped with the micro-credential training, the financial statements, business plans, and training on the FinBest. This was specifically for the finance department. At the airport, we had the airport security training in June of last year, but we also having it now in February of this year. We have the Dutch courses from Civil Reach, the Emergency Response Officer, the BHV training, and then we also had the basic training for confidential advisors, and then for the Census Office in particular, we had the Dresseurs Academy, and then for the VAK, we also had a legal trip for the legal advisors on municipal law. And this year, the ones that we're busy with is next week. Next week we'll have one on emotional management and aggressive work situations. March and April there will be 8 sessions on awareness program for team leaders, focused on raising awareness, recognition, and acknowledgement of staff with disabilities. There'll be project finance for funding projects successfully. And then for the archives specifically, there's a convention for yourself. So what we're also doing is exploring the collaboration, as we said yesterday, with the CN Academy, this initiative from RCN. And we seek to support the training and the education of civil servants from all 3 islands, St. Croix Station, Bonaire, including the RCN. And with regard to the well-being, we continue to offer access to well-being initiatives, including the confidential coach, the massages, and the gym subsidy. Then the specific thing you asked about the products, that's also in the outlined in the document. But when you go through, you can see what those are, and you'll see specifically which ones the department is requesting. On page 4.
Thank you, Governor. Do you have any follow-up questions at this time, Mr. Charles?
I just would like to share that we shared yesterday, but it's good to hear that there is someone that has the intention of learning about within the organization. I think that will contribute significantly to the growth of persons in the organization. Someone that you can reach out to and share their concerns about where they would like to grow and where they see themselves developing within the organization. So I think that's a good step and positive development for everyone.
Before you continue, do anyone else have any follow-up remarks or questions? No? We can continue.
The next question was in relation to the installation of Christmas lights, and it was approval of the tender to install the Christmas lights in the villages. And whenever you travel, sometimes you see certain things. I think Christmas time is really a time for the community and for family. And over the years, you hear people talk about how they miss the Christmas spirit and how we used to do things years ago, and the jollification and all these type of things. And which I think is important. I remember when I was in college, once I spent some time away from home for Christmas, and I promised I'd never do that again because it was so lonely. But with family, you really miss a lot of what Christmas is about. And so I really think that we've carved out this time. Society's carved out this time for us to celebrate and spend time with family and community. And I think, however we can support that, we should look for ways to do that. So the question was that this is really incidental income for whoever the recipient of that bid is, and I'm not trying to take bread out of anyone's mouth, but I think we can also ask if that could also be shifted to bringing the community together. And what I see is maybe in every village, they can bring residents of those villages together, and then they can install the lights, maybe always put some poles, and then they just have to string lights up, and then they can have a shared jollification at the end. And I think that would, make people feel more, connected to Christmas and, create more of a Christmas atmosphere. Like when you go to other places in the Netherlands, you patrol Europe, you see these Christmas villages, they're serving different drinks and different Christmas foods. And I think we should look forward to creating and developing, stimulating that sort of atmosphere here. So I'm just wondering if the Executive Council sees that as an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I do agree with you. The Department of Community Development and Culture was actually reconsidering how to address Christmas lighting for 2025, and I guess this suggestion that you had, where it involves the community from the different villages to participate in putting up the Christmas lights, is a very good initiative. I do agree with it. It's something that we need to get started sooner than later.
Believe me, Madam Chair, that was the big. That has to be from the beginning. Commissioner Sagers and that too. And we had different communities doing it and it didn't work.
That's how it started.
It started the first 2 years and now so much.
That's good.
Then the government probably wants that coming. Seriously. It's a little hit like we went through that.
Madam Chair, if I may, it's a great initiative and something that I think for sure we should try to see if we can, get back on track.
Yeah.
But having been one that used to volunteer as a young man, or a teenager, eventually, it would start with a larger group, and then year by year, that group just got smaller and smaller, and then it was like 1 or 2 people that, really pushed it to make sure it happened each and every year, and at some point it was just like, hey, everyone's for everyone's enjoyment, but this is becoming a bit too much. But I do think that how to get back that Christmas spirit, we should try to see if we can, get that moving again.
And it's fun. It's a good initiative. It's fun.
Even call it a best Christmas village.
I think we're also all residents, and I think we all have a responsibility to stimulate people to participate in these different endeavors. So, we can all together, try to ensure people come out. And I think, I don't know how long ago was when you were young. And I'm trying to call you.
So young now.
I think there's different ways of stimulating community engagement now. We have the social media, we have chats and so on. So we can look at ways of getting people out and enticing them to be part of the I think it's a great initiative. I look forward to seeing how we put it in practice this year and then continue in the years to come.
Before you continue, Mr. Charles, Mr. Everett also.
Yeah, based on the discussion, I was also one of the volunteers in the past. Each member here on this table is from each village.
There you go.
So if we're going to take an initiative like that, I, for one, from the village of Hellsgate, volunteer to be part of that group. And I think Sassus from Riverside, Bottom, St. John's. Oh, you got Peter could be the neutral person in between. Yeah, I think this is a great initiative. How better than the council itself to be the trackers.
That's what I was trying to express. So I think that's also good. So I think we have a lot of support just in this room already.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Heller. You have the next remark?
You had 2 questions, right?
I can't lump them together. But if you care to respond to different aspects.
For the second question, the idea was to actually create a Christmas village in the park here in Boston. And then where families can spend some time together, take pictures, for example. And we'll also need to purchase some new Christmas lights. And I want to counter that because during the Christmas season there was some controversy about the lights, but there was a reason why those lights were bought and not the traditional bulb. The traditional bulb, to put these lights up, you had to put a strand of wire in between the connection to keep the lights stable. But sometimes when they were taken and done, the lights would automatically get loose from the individual's hands, and when they fall, they break. And to replace them is very difficult. So that's why they went with the strand. If the strand falls, they don't break. But I guess the strands were a little bit smaller, because they come in different sizes, I think. If I'm not mistaken, an inch, 2 inch, inch and a half, and they go up in different. So I guess the size we had was a little bit too small, so it didn't show that much. From a distance you would see them, but up close they were like very small. So I guess the idea is to see if we can find the traditional bulbs, but maybe in plastic and not into glass material.
Yeah, maybe we could just keep that, because I think, for instance, when you go to different places that you really see, like you've been to Medellin, and you saw what they have there, and for instance, in the Netherlands, on different streets, and I don't want to say, that we should just spend money crazy, but I think putting something together that really people appreciate and that makes them feel that Christmas atmosphere. There's so much happening in the world, and we have a few this last month of the year where we can sort of just put down the troubles that we experience and try to reflect on the joys of life, and we should really try to embrace that. And so I really like that you are considering different options and really appealing to the aesthetic of Christmas.
Just one more thing I would like to add concerning this, since again we're all the government inside there, I think we should also bring back the lighting of the Christmas tree in the government lawn. I think that's something that has also been missing over the years, and maybe it's an idea that you all already have, but I think that's also a good way to bring civil servants together as well. So just throwing that out there as well. Does that conclude this question?
Yes.
Okay. Now we can move on to your next. My third question was in relation to the safety walls and dancing place.
And then from the decision that you can see that the bid was broken down in 2 parts. And I'm just curious if there was a reason for the bid being broken down in 2 parts rather than just, rolling out the bid in just one, getting it done, one contractor just getting it done so that it's finally complete. And then even though it was broken down in 2 parts, I saw recently, today, they were doing some pouring in that area, so I guess work has started, but I was just wondering why, because it was supposed to be completed by the end of January, and here we are, more or less the end of February, and only now they're moving forward with completion. And then something I discuss more often is maintaining the traditional rock wall structure in those areas. It goes back to what we talked about with lights. It's that aesthetic appeal, and that's one of the things that Saba is sort of known for is the rock walls. And you see every time the wall is broken down or the road is widened, that's gone. And of course, there was a structural reason for that in the past. It was practical because the rocks were just very plentiful, as anyone knows that built Saba. But also, it created this nice aesthetic that everybody appreciates when they're driving along the roads, and I see that as sort of being pushed out every time we do new work, and I think it's a tragic loss to our cultural heritage. That's something we also have discussed how to maintain that, and I hope that we can also try to incorporate that in construction, new renovations and rehabilitations as we move forward.
Does that conclude your questions? Commissioner?
Yeah, well, the project was split in 2 pieces, mainly because of budget. It was nearing the end of the year, and as much as possible, we can't spend money that you don't have. So you know, the goal was to try to spend the money that was available for 2024 while also ensuring that the work could continue in 2025. So that was the main reason why it was split. And then there became another division because when the safety wall was removed from the area it was widened, it was clearly seen that the foundation of the wall was greatly eroded. And you know, this called for, of course, a much bigger project than what was initially expected by just replacing the safety wall. And that also created an opportunity that the road could be widened. So, you know, that's why, again, that section was then divided in two, because, you know, widening that whole section and doing it around the corner, first of all, meant that, you know, there would be sufficient budget to complete it during the period of 2024. But then also, you would have, you know, construction going on during the holidays, and of course, you know, most of the construction companies, they stop working during that period. So we just wanted to ensure that how at least that one straight section was widened and finished before the Christmas season. And then the second part went on tender, and as you correctly mentioned, construction has started. And then the remaining part of the safety wall from the Jesquarta area up to Seba Splash was a shorter section, but that will also be placed on bid soon. With regards to the rock walls, indeed, you know, that's something that is very appealing to the eye. It looks much better than a poured wall. But when you look at the foundations of the wall and the height differences, and when you consider safety, you know, it's rather complex to say that you can, you know, widen those sections of roads and really make it structurally sound to, you know, hold the weight of the bigger vehicles, the heavier vehicles that we see on our roads. You know, years ago you would have a 2-bag mixer that's, you know, pouring the foundations of the wall, whereas today you probably pass down as a, you know, a 7-ton mixer truck, you know, onto the same walls and foundations that were built, you know, decades ago. And, you know, if you look at it, when you walk the roads and you really look down, you know, they're not really like face rock walls that's built coming up, you know, that those were real traditional rough rock walls that, you know, anything would just kind of throw together to build up to get to the height to make the road possible. And, you know, in many cases, yeah, the structural, the strength isn't what it needs to be. So that's why in areas where the roads have been widened, it has been done with concrete. But that's on the lower end more of the foundation. But whereas, you know, like in Hell's Gate, for example, where it's being widened onto the land side, where it's more of a retaining wall, you know, those walls are being built out of, you know, with face walls with rocks. And, you know, the poured safety wall itself that's above the level of the road, it's much stronger when it's poured and it's done with steel and concrete. So the safety component is also plays a big role into that. And, you know, if you look at most of the safety walls, the ones from road level up, you know, many of those, you don't necessarily see the face rocks on the side of the roads, more so onto the lower end, you know, facing the area below.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have any follow-up questions? Does anyone else have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, well, maybe it's not related to that. I thought it was dancing place, I'm sure, but actually the monument that's there, that area, if there's any plans for that, I know it's not part of the questions, but I see all the dancing place. I just wanted to ask, in regards to the reconstruction of that area, are they going to do something with that spot as well?
Yeah, it had been looked at in the past a few years ago, and, you know, really it's a big project to secure the rock.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of progress sometimes it, you know, has a negative component to it. And because with one of the manholes that's there, the underground cabling, water was going from the manhole and eroded underneath the rock. You know, it is something that I think we have to try to secure. But yeah, I think we have to have another look at it. But it's not included into that part of the project.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any follow-up questions, or can we move on? No? Mr. Charles, you can continue.
Technical issue because just passes. No.
Your computer there?
No, it's loading. Yeah, keep the
So the next point was the P&C calendar for approval, correct?
Yes, correct. In a previous meeting, there was a discussion of providing a moment for the council to provide input for the budget for 2026 in so-called spring memorandum. I was curious if this was communicated to the finance department and included in the calendar, to be included in the calendar. And then another point of interest is that in other municipalities, the implementation reports outline in a way that they align to the governing programs, which makes it easier to see how the governing program is being implemented. Is this something that the Executive Council is taking into consideration?
Indeed, there will be sessions organized with the Island Council. If they haven't been scheduled already, they should be scheduled shortly because they have been included into the PNC calendar. So I would expect that the Island Council should get an invitation because the idea was that it would be organized during the February-March period. So yeah, that should be forthcoming soon. As for the implementation reports and the way that other municipalities can manage their reporting, there's a big difference between a regular municipality and say the regular municipality doesn't have to deal with financial supervision. So we are bound to follow the structure of our reporting based on the BBVBES. But as much as possible, we can try to see how we can align that with the governing program, because once it's formalized, of course, because I do believe that that is a good tool that we can measure the results of the implementation of that program. But there will be limitations with the way we can structure it, because we have to adhere to the guidelines that is outlined by the BBVBES. And that's also how it's measured by CFD to ensure that the reporting is complete.
Well, for me, it's just, if you look at, I think that's something the discussion we can have at that time, because I don't know which particular paragraph in the BBVBES that you're referring to. And I'm just curious how, because I know, for instance, in the back of every report it's all the mandatory paragraphs, but I think there's a lot of freedom ahead of that to, interpret it and report, for instance, different statements how you would like. So I'm just, I think it gives a better insight into how government is functioning. And then ultimately that's what's best, because, the reporting ultimately is for the public and not, you have your reporting that is legally mandated, but it's also for the public to see what government is doing. That's what the reporting is for. And I think if they can read the document, which is much more coherent, rather than just, it's this department and this department and this department and this department, then it's, then you can also find out, I think, quite much more easier what's being done for that.
Well, the reporting follows the format of the budget. And the budget format is regulated by that regulation. So it's hard to deviate, because in that regulation it states how each individual budget is aligned within the budget. So it's a bit more complex to say that how you just completely change the format of it to align with the governing program. But I do think that how there's room that we can see how we can incorporate both documents that is an easier read to everyone to see with what progress is being made.
And it's not only, there's the easier read, but I think it's also about, this is how we are spending money for the community. And I think that's what's most important. That we're spending this money and how it's having an impact and how what's the intended objective of it. And I oftentimes when I read the different reports, and I understand that it's subscribing to these objectives that we're given by various ministries and so on. So then you're like, this was spent for this and this was spent for that program. But then you also can't tell the public, well, this is what we're doing for you, because they can't find themselves in that structure. So I hope it's something that we can work on, and it's not something I think that will change overnight. I've been in council for a few years, and this is just a new insight that I've gotten, and I think we should look at it to see how we can address it. Because you mentioned the larger municipalities, but one example that I took was from the next smallest municipality that we work closely with, and they'll be here next month, sorry. And that's Utawala, and they have a municipality of just 13 island council members, so they're relatively small in comparison to all the other municipalities in Netherlands. So it wasn't that I took, from Amsterdam or Rotterdam, but or even a much more medium-sized municipality, but a really small municipality.
No, well, my point was more so that, they have freedom, in a sense, because they don't have financial supervision. So we're still bound by, what's prescribed by financial supervision. Whereas a regular municipality, they don't have that. We still get treated like an Article 13 plus municipality. So I mean, the amount of supervision that Save Us Station and Bonaire has, even though Save Us track record, has been excellent for the past years, we're still treated like if we're a bankrupt municipality, and that is because of financial supervision. And the hope is that once the FinDesk is changed, that will be a bit more freedom in the way that we report. But yeah, that's still something to come.
And maybe it's a discussion we can have now with the CFT, because even in the last report we talked about how long SAFA has had good and unqualified financial reports, and maybe it's time to have a discussion that aligning reporting with our governing program.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Does anyone else have any follow-up questions or remarks? That concluded your questions. So that was the last point of the Executive Council decision list of flag questions. So this brings us to the last agenda point, which is closing. So today we covered 6 points on the agenda. And at this time, I would like to thank you all for joining the Central Committee meeting of today, February 18, 2025. I would like to remind the public of the Island Council meeting on Thursday, February 20th, 2025 at 2 p.m. So this Thursday. And we will have other agenda points to be discussed during this meeting. So until then, thank you again for joining us, and do have a pleasant day further. Meeting closed.